Dear reader, I am writing to you from the most dreadful place a young woman can find herself in the year of our Lord 1893, a railway platform. My mother, you see, has had an idea. Mother has ideas the way other people have colds, suddenly, violently, and to the great inconvenience of everyone around her. This particular idea is that I am to be put on a train, sent 2 counties away, and presented to the family of a gentleman she describes as eligible. I have not met this gentleman. I have met his income, which Mother recites the way a vicar recites scripture. So I am to be inspected, dear reader, shipped across the countryside like a prize sow to a county fair, in the hope that some man will find me agreeable enough to marry, and Mother can finally stop introducing me with a sigh as my daughter still at home. But that is not the worst of it. The worst of it is the machine that is to carry me there. Because in this modern age, dear reader, we no longer travel by honest horse. No, we travel by railway. And the railway, I have come to learn, is a place of comfort, of convenience, of marvellous modern speed, and of accidents, crime, and I am entirely serious, madness. So come along with me, dear reader, as I board this iron beast against my better judgment, travel to meet a man I have no wish to marry, and tell you everything there is to know about the genuinely terrifying world of Victorian railway travel. Now, I shall be fair to the railway, which is more than it has ever been to me. The arrival of the train genuinely changed everything. Before the railway, if one wished to travel any real distance over land, one climbed into a stagecoach and rattled along the breathless pace of roughly 8 miles in an hour, assuming the roads were good, the horses willing, and no highwayman took an interest in your purse. The railway changed that overnight. Suddenly, one could travel at speeds 3 times as fast, moving people and goods across the whole country at a pace no human being had ever experienced before. It was, by every measure, a marvel. Try, for a moment, to imagine it. Imagine you have spent your entire life moving no faster than a horse can trot. And then you are placed inside a great roaring contraption of iron and steam and hurled across the earth faster than anything alive. Some of the very first passengers described it as being fired like a bullet. Others were quite convinced that travelling at such speeds would do them a permanent injury. There were those who believed the human body simply could not breathe at such velocity. Others feared the speed would rattle the brain loose in one's skull. And while we may laugh at that now, sitting, as we are, on a bench that has rattled my own brain quite thoroughly in the last half hour, you must remember, nobody had ever gone this fast before. They had no notion of what it would do to them. Fear, dear reader, is simply the mind's response to the unfamiliar, and nothing was more unfamiliar than this. Of course, this being England, the experience of railway travel depended entirely on how much money one had. Heaven forbid we let a marvel of the modern age be enjoyed equally by all. If you travelled first or second class, your carriage was modelled on the old stagecoach, something familiar, something comfortable. In time, these became genuinely luxurious. Plush upholstered seats, fine fittings, the whole compartment decorated to feel rather like a drawing room that happened to be moving at speed. And if you travelled third class? Well, in the early days, third class meant an open wagon. No roof, no walls to speak of. You stood, or sat on bare boards, fully exposed to the wind, the rain, the bitter cold, and, my personal favourite, the hot ash and smoke blowing back from the engine directly into your face. Passengers compared it to being carted about like livestock, which, given my own circumstances this morning, I find I can sympathise with entirely. And because the early carriages had nothing whatsoever to soften the ride, every passenger was flung about mercilessly for the entire journey. On occasion, the railways had to slow the trains down in poor weather, lest the third-class passengers be quite literally shaken to pieces. The journey took hours longer, but at least one arrived assembled. Conditions did eventually improve. In 1844, Parliament passed the Railway Regulation Act, which, among other things, required that all carriages, even third class, finally have a roof. A roof! Imagine the celebration! Imagine fighting for, and winning, the radical luxury of not being rained upon. It was still the barest possible provision, you understand. Dozens of souls packed onto hard wooden benches behind tiny windows for the whole journey. But it was, at last, a roof. Progress, dear reader, arrives slowly, and usually only after enough people have complained about the weather. Now, the wealthier classes had a particular luxury, the private compartment, a small enclosed room of your very own, which sounds delightful, until you learn that these compartments were frequently locked from the outside. Yes, to preserve one's privacy, one was sealed inside a little box and could not get out again until a railway official came and unlocked the door at the next station. You were, in every meaningful sense, trapped. Should anything go wrong, and we shall come to the many things that went wrong, there you remained, with no way out and no way to call for help. But here is the part that delights me most, as a student of human absurdity. The train created an entirely new kind of social torture. You see, a compartment was a public space. You might be seated with complete strangers, yet it was furnished like a private one. Nobody knew the rules. Were you to make conversation? Were you to sit in silence? And unlike a stagecoach, the strangers changed at every station, so there was no point getting acquainted at all. For we English, dear reader, this was a nightmare beyond description. To be sealed in a tiny room with a stranger for an hour, with no agreed rule about whether one ought to speak. And so the railways, bless them, discovered the solution. And it is the same solution I employ to this very day. They began selling reading material at the stations, newspapers, periodicals, anything at all that a gentleman or lady might hold up before their face as a socially acceptable means of pretending the other person does not exist. I find this deeply reassuring. It means that the great British art of avoiding eye contact behind a newspaper is not a modern failing, but a noble and ancient tradition. We have been ignoring one another with impeccable manners for generations. Let us speak, then, of the danger. Because the railway was new, the rules of how to behave around it were learned the hard way, which is to say, by people being hurt. In the early days, passengers did the most extraordinary things. They stood up in moving carriages, they climbed onto the roofs, they leaned out, stuck out their heads and limbs, and some bold souls even attempted to leap from a train still in motion. And those not on the train fared little better,
For nobody yet understood that a railway track was a place of genuine danger. People were used to slow vehicles, a cart, a carriage, things that could stop or be steered aside in a moment. But a train could do neither. It could not stop at a moment's notice, and it certainly could not swerve. A great many accidents happened simply because people, on foot and at the controls alike, misjudged how very long it takes to halt a thing so heavy and so fast. As the years went on, those accidents born of pure ignorance grew fewer. But the larger, more dreadful accidents remained. Derailments, collisions, and boiler explosions, born of mechanical failure or human error. And these terrified the public in a way that other dangers of the age did not. Consider, this was the industrial age. People died in mines, people died in factories and at sea in their thousands. And yet the railway accident haunted the imagination far more than any of these. Why? Because it was violent and sudden. Because it struck rich and poor alike in the same carriage. And because it could happen not in some distant mine or far-off ocean, but right outside your own town, to anyone, on an ordinary Tuesday.
And the newspapers. Oh, the newspapers adored it. They reported every railway accident in loving, gruesome detail, often wildly exaggerated, and gave them far more attention than the facts ever deserved. The truth, dear reader, is that the railways were, on the whole, remarkably safe. Far more people came to grief beneath the wheels of ordinary horse-drawn traffic than ever did upon the railways. But the horse did not make a thrilling headline. The train did. And now, dear reader, we arrive at my favourite horror of all. Because as if accidents and locked doors and enforced silence were not enough, the Victorian public became convinced of one further danger lurking aboard the train. Madness.
I am entirely serious. According to a number of respectable physicians of the day, the very motion and sound of a railway train could drive an otherwise ordinary, sane person into a temporary fit of insanity.
The alleged cases all followed a curiously similar pattern. A perfectly normal person boards a train. After a while, the motion working upon them, they grow agitated, strange, sometimes violent. And then, the moment the train halts at a station, they return entirely to themselves, calm and ordinary, only to descend once more into madness the instant the wheels begin to turn again. There were reports, lurid ones, naturally, of passengers who had to be physically restrained by their fellow travellers until the journey's end. And the public, already nervous, now had a fresh terror to chew upon, that the quiet stranger sealed into the compartment beside you might at any moment, and through no fault of his own, simply lose his mind. Now, what are we to make of this? The physicians of the day believed, in earnest, that modern life had simply become too much for the human nerves, that the speed, the noise, the rattling and the confinement of the railway overwhelmed the delicate mind and tipped it briefly into chaos. Scholars since have offered a rather more sensible explanation, that railway madness was very largely a panic, a story the newspapers told and told and told again, until the public half believed the carriages were full of hidden lunatics. It fed neatly into the anxieties of the age, about the dizzying pace of modern life, and about madness itself, which the Victorians both feared and terribly misunderstood. And yet, I shall confess something to you, dear reader.
Having now spent several hours sealed in a rattling iron box, jostled half to pieces, breathing smoke, forbidden from leaving, and being carried against my will toward a man I have no wish to marry, I begin to think the Victorians were onto something. If I am not mad by the time I reach my destination, it shall be a small miracle. And if I am, well, I shall blame the train.
In time, dear reader, the railways improved beyond all recognition. The carriages were redesigned, with corridors running through them, so that passengers were no longer sealed into separate boxes, but could move freely from one to the next, which made the train at once safer, more comfortable, and considerably harder to come to mischief upon. Heating arrived, lighting arrived. Even, eventually, that most blessed of inventions, a lavatory. And as the train became an ordinary part of life, the terror surrounding it quietly faded away, until people thought no more of boarding one than of putting on their boots. As for me, the train has at last begun to slow. My station approaches. Somewhere on the platform ahead stands a gentleman I do not know, and his family, all prepared to decide whether I am a suitable addition to their household. I have smoke in my hair, ash upon my collar, and the distinct expression of a woman who has spent the morning contemplating railway madness at uncomfortably close quarters. I cannot imagine I shall make a favourable impression. I find I do not greatly mind. Until next time, dear reader, I remain yours, jostled, smoked, and entirely unmarried. Yours, History.